Hey everyone, I want to tell you about something that happened to me last year. It's kind of crazy, and honestly, I still can't believe it went down the way it did. Imagine working at the same company for 5 years. 5 years of giving everything you have, arriving early, leaving late, sacrificing weekends. And then, in a meeting with 40 people watching, your boss stands up, points his finger directly at your face, and screams,
"You're nothing. A zero that any intern could replace tomorrow."
That's what happened to me on March 14th, 2023. And this is the story of how I completely destroyed my boss's career in less than 10 minutes. Stay until the end because the twist is absolutely insane. Okay, so context. My name is Alex. I was 29 years old at the time, and I worked as a financial analyst at a mid-sized tech company. I was that employee that every company has. You know? The reliable one. That person who is always there, arrives early, stays late, never complains, and always delivers on time. My colleagues used to joke that I was married to the company. And honestly, they weren't wrong. I lived and breathed TechCorp. I knew every process, every system, every quirk in our financial software. I could tell you which vendors we use for which services. I could recite our quarterly numbers from memory. I was that guy. And my boss, Richard Thornton. Oh man, Richard. Picture the absolute stereotype of a corporate douchebag executive. $3,000 suits. Swiss watch that probably cost more than my car. Hair always perfectly gelled back. That fake tan that rich people get. You know the type. Richard was VP of Finance. He'd been with the company for 8 years, and he ran that department like it was his personal kingdom. And from day one, literally day one, he made it crystal clear that I was beneath him. Every meeting, it was always good work, Alex, or that's interesting, but that's not what we need. Never a direct compliment. Never genuine recognition. Always a backhanded comment that made me feel small. And here's the messed up part. I blame myself. I thought, maybe I'm not working hard enough. Maybe I need to prove myself more. So I worked harder, stayed later, took on extra projects, volunteered for the boring stuff nobody wanted. I believed that corporate lie we're all fed, you know? Work hard and you'll be rewarded. Keep your head down and do good work. That's bullshit. Complete bullshit. And I learned that the hardest way possible. But before I get to the meeting, I need to tell you about what I discovered. It was late February, maybe 3 weeks before the big meeting. I was doing my usual end-of-month reconciliation. Super boring stuff, right? Matching expense reports with actual bank transfers, making sure everything balanced out. And I noticed something weird. There was a payment to a vendor I'd never heard of. Summit Solutions Consulting. $12,000 for a strategic planning workshop in Miami. Now, normally I wouldn't think twice about it. Companies pay for consultants all the time, but something fell off. So I checked the previous months. And there was again Summit Solutions. $8,000 in January, $15,000 in December, $10,000 in November. I went back through the entire previous year. This company had been paid $73,000 for various consulting services and training workshops. And I had never heard of them. Never seen anyone from this company. Never been to any of these workshops. So I did what any good analyst would do. I Googled them. Nothing. No website. No LinkedIn. No business registration that I could find. So then I checked the business registry database. Summit Solutions Consulting was registered in Delaware, which is already a red flag, and the business address was a UPS store. Literally a mailbox at a UPS store. That's when I knew something was very, very wrong. But I didn't know how wrong until I started digging deeper. I pulled every single expense report that mentioned Summit Solutions. There were 17 of them over 2 years. And every single one was approved by the same person. Can you guess who? Richard Thornton. My boss. Every single one. But it gets worse. I started looking at other vendors. Innovate Global Partners, another company I'd never heard of, $32,000 over 8 months. Same thing. No website, no real presence. Business address at a virtual office. And who approved all those expenses? Richard. Then I found Strategic Advisors Group. Next Gen Consulting Solutions. Peak Performance Systems. 5 different fake companies. All registered in Delaware or Nevada. All with virtual offices or P.O. boxes. All approved by Richard. I spent 2 weeks going through everything. Bank statements, expense reports, wire transfer records. I cross-referenced dates. I checked Richard's calendar against the dates of these supposed consulting sessions on 3 separate occasions. He claimed to be at a 3-day consulting workshop while his calendar showed he was actually on vacation in Europe with his family. The wire transfers for all these fake companies were going to the same bank. And when I dug into the account holder information, the account was under the name of Richard's wife, Emily Thornton. It wasn't even hidden that well. He just thought nobody would ever check. Over 2 years, Richard had funneled $847,000 from TechCorp into fake consulting companies that all eventually transferred money to accounts controlled by him and his wife. Now, here's where I made a decision. I could have gone straight to HR. I could have gone to the CEO. I could have reported it immediately, but I didn't. You know why? Because I knew Richard. I knew his ego. I knew he would somehow spin it, somehow make it seem like a misunderstanding, somehow blame someone else, probably me. So I decided to wait. I decided to document everything, every transaction, every fake company, every lie, and I decided to wait for the perfect moment. March 14th, 2023. Monday morning, 9 a.m., I get an email from Richard, mandatory department meeting. All financial staff. Today at 2 p.m. Subject, Q1 performance and results. I remember staring at that email and feeling this knot in my stomach because I knew Richard. When he called mandatory meetings with that kind of subject line, someone was about to get thrown under the bus. But I didn't know it was going to be me. I showed up to the conference room at 1:55 p.m. The place was packed. All 40 members of the finance department. Junior analysts, senior analysts, managers, everyone. There was this heavy energy in the room, you know? That corporate anxiety where everyone's on their phones, pretending to be busy, but really everyone's just nervous about what's coming. Richard walks in at exactly 2 p.m. He's wearing his most expensive suit. I know it's his most expensive because he once told me it cost $4,000, which is insane. He's got his PowerPoint ready. He's got this confident swagger. And he starts the presentation. Standard corporate stuff. Charts about revenue. Graphs about efficiency. Blah, blah, blah. And then he gets to this slide that says personnel performance analysis. And his whole tone changes. He starts talking about how some people really step up and drive value, and other people are just taking up space, coasting, not really contributing to the mission. And I can see people getting uncomfortable. Everyone's looking around, wondering who he's talking about. And then he stops talking. Just stops, looks around the room. And his eyes. I saw his eyes scanning the room, and then they locked onto mine. And in that moment, I knew exactly what was about to happen. And he says, in this fake friendly voice, actually, since we're talking about people taking up space, Alex, could you stand up, please? My heart dropped, like physically dropped into my stomach. Every single head in that room turned to look at me. 40 pairs of eyes. Some curious, some sympathetic, some just uncomfortable. I stood up, and I could feel my legs shaking. I had no idea what he was going to say, but I knew it wasn't good. And Richard, with his smile on his face, the smug, satisfied smile, he starts, everyone, take a good look at Alex here. Alex has been with us for 5 years. 5 years. And in that time, can anyone tell me what significant contributions Alex has made? Nobody said anything. Silence. Total silence. And he continues, let me answer that for you. 0. 0 strategic initiatives. 0 innovative projects. 0 leadership. Alex is the perfect example of what we don't need in this department. Someone who just processes numbers, who just does what he's told. who brings absolutely no original thought or value to this organization. And then he gets louder. He actually raises his voice and says, "Do you know what you are, Alex? You're a placeholder. You're a seat warmer. You're a body-occupying chair that could be filled by someone with actual ambition, actual drive, actual value." And then he screams, and I mean SREMS. "You're nothing. You are nothing. You're a zero, Alex. A complete zero that any intern fresh out of college could replace tomorrow morning."
You're nothing. A zero that any intern could replace tomorrow.
The room went completely silent. That awful, thick silence where you can hear people breathing. I felt my face burning. I felt humiliated, angry, embarrassed, all at once. A few people were looking down at their laps, clearly uncomfortable. Some looked shocked. But nobody, and I mean nobody, said a word in my defense. And Richard? Richard had this satisfied smirk on his face, like he'd just won something. Like publicly destroying me made him feel powerful. And in that moment, I made a decision. I thought about all those weeks of investigation, all those fake companies, all that stolen money, all those lies. And I thought, this is the moment. This is the perfect moment. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, literally trembling, but I reached down and opened my laptop. Everyone was still looking at me, probably expecting me to sit down defeated, maybe even cry. Richard crossed his arms, waiting for me to quietly accept my humiliation. And I said, in the calmest voice I could manage, "Can I make an observation, Richard?" He looked surprised for a second. Then he got this condescending expression and said, "Oh, now you want to speak? Sure, Alex. Enlighten us with your wisdom." A few people laughed nervously. I said, "You're absolutely right. I am just an analyst. Someone who spends his days processing boring numbers. Numbers that, as you said, any intern could process." I paused, looked around the room, then back at Richard. But you know what boring numbers reveal when you actually pay attention to them? Patterns, inconsistencies, and fraud. The energy in that room changed instantly, like you could physically feel it shift. Richard's face went from smug to pale in about 2 seconds. People started sitting up straighter, leaning forward, and I continued. Over the past 3 weeks, while doing my boring, irrelevant work, I noticed something strange in our department's expense reports. Payments to vendors I'd never heard of, consulting services I'd never seen delivered, training workshops that, when I researched them, never actually happened. So I did what any good number processor would do. I investigated. I cross-referenced expense reports with bank statements. I checked business registrations. I called vendors. I verified every single transaction. And you know what I found? I found that someone in this company has stolen $847,000 over the past 2 years through fake consulting companies, fake workshops, fake expenses, creating shell companies with virtual offices, funneling money through them, and transferring it to personal accounts. The room absolutely erupted. People gasping, talking over each other, chairs scraping. Richard tried to interrupt. "Alex, what you're suggesting is extremely serious and completely." But I cut him off. I said, "I'm not suggesting anything, Richard. I'm stating facts. Because I have proof. Emails, wire transfers, business registrations, fake invoices, all of it." And then I turned my laptop around so the whole room could see the screen. I had a document pulled up, 147 pages. The first page was titled Financial Fraud Investigation, Unauthorized Transfers and Shell Company Operations. And right there, in the second line, it said, Primary Subject, Richard Thornton, VP of Finance. I said, Summit Solutions Consulting. That's a company registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. The account holder for wire transfers? Emily Thornton. Your wife? Richard. Innovate Global Partners. Registered in Nevada. Same virtual office address that 14 other shell companies use. Account holder? Also Emily Thornton. Strategic Advisors Group. Next Gen Consulting. Peak Performance Systems. All fake. All registered to addresses that don't exist. All funneling money to accounts controlled by you and your wife. Richard was frozen. completely frozen. His face had gone from pale to bright red. He tried to speak, but his voice came out shaky. This is ridiculous. This is a baseless accusation. You have no authority to... And I interrupted him again. I said, I have every transaction. I have the dates you claim to be at consulting workshops, while you were actually on vacation in Barcelona. I have the wire transfer records showing where the money went. I have the business registration documents showing who owns these fake companies. And most importantly, Richard, I sent a complete copy of this report to the legal department, internal audit, and the CFO 20 minutes ago, at 1:40 p.m. today. While you were preparing this presentation about how I'm worthless, they were opening my 147-page documented proof of your embezzlement. The room was chaos. People standing up, talking loudly. Some people had their phones out. Richard's assistant was staring at him with this look of horror. And Richard was just standing there, speechless. For the first time in 5 years, he had absolutely nothing to say. And then, like something out of a movie, his phone rang. Everyone heard it, that loud iPhone ringtone echoing through the conference room. He looked at the screen. We all saw his face go completely white. It was the CEO. Richard stumbled out of the conference room to take the call. The meeting was over. Done. 40 people immediately started talking all at once. Some came up to me asking questions. Others were Googling the shell companies on their phones. My friend Janet from accounting came over and just said, "Oh my God, Alex. Oh my God." I remember sitting there, adrenaline crashing, hands still shaking, thinking, did that really just happen? 2 hours later, 2 hours, security escorted Richard out of the building. He had a box with his personal items and 2 security guards walking him to his car. I watched from my desk. He didn't even look around, just walked straight out. That was the last time I saw him in person. Later that day, our CEO sent a company-wide email. Richard Thornton is no longer with TechCorp effective immediately. A full investigation is underway. That was it. No explanation. But everyone knew. Over the next few days, the full story leaked to the press. Tech executive embezzles nearly $1 million, while publicly humiliating employee who exposed him. It went viral, like national news viral. CNN covered it. Forbes covered it. It became this whole thing about toxic corporate culture and karma. My name was kept confidential in most reports, but within the industry, people knew. 3 weeks after the meeting, I got called into a conference room with the board directors. I honestly thought I was getting fired. Like, maybe they were mad I caused such a huge scandal. But instead, the CEO said, "Alex, we owe you an enormous apology. What Richard did to you was inexcusable. What he did to this company was criminal. And what you did, the investigation, the documentation, the courage to speak up, potentially saved this company from millions more in losses." And then he said, "We'd like to offer you Richard's position, Director of Finance." I was speechless. I literally couldn't speak for like 10 seconds. And then I said, "I'll accept on one condition. We implement an anonymous reporting system for fraud and abuse, and we create a zero-tolerance policy for workplace harassment and humiliation." They agreed immediately. So I took the job. I became Director of Finance at 29 years old, the youngest director in company history. And the first thing I did, I hired an external firm to audit every single expense from the past 5 years. We found 2 more people who've been doing similar schemes, smaller scale. They were terminated and prosecuted. So what happened to Richard? He was arrested 4 months later. Federal charges, wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. The total amount was actually over $1 million when they finished the investigation. He'd been doing it for 3 years, not 2. He went to trial, was found guilty, and was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. His wife cooperated with prosecutors and got probation. They lost their house, their cars, everything. And me? I'm still at TechCorp. I'm now VP of Finance. I got promoted again last year. I run the same department Richard used to run, but very differently. We have open communication. We have systems to prevent fraud. And most importantly, we have a culture where people are treated with respect. Nobody gets publicly humiliated in my meetings. So, what did I learn from all this? First, never let anyone define your worth. Richard called me nothing in front of 40 people, but I always knew my value. And more importantly, I proved my value, not by working harder, not by staying later, but by being thorough, by paying attention, by doing my job with integrity. Second, document everything. I didn't confront Richard with emotions or arguments. I confronted him with irrefutable evidence. Numbers, dates, concrete proof. That's power. Third, timing matters. I could have exposed Richard 3 weeks earlier, but I waited for the perfect moment. The moment when he was most confident, most arrogant, when his guard was completely down, and that made his fall so much more devastating. And finally, people who try to diminish you are usually hiding something. Richard was so desperate to make me look small because he was terrified of what I might discover about him. Bullies are almost always compensating for their own insecurities or covering their own crimes. The best part? That conference room where he humiliated me, we renamed it. It's now called the Integrity Room. We use it for ethics training. There's a plaque on the wall that says, "Speak truth to power." Nobody knows why it's called that except the people who were in that meeting. But we all know, and every time I walk past that room, I smile. If you've ever been told you're nothing by a boss, by a colleague, by anyone, remember this story. Remember that you're never nothing. Sometimes you're the only person standing between truth and injustice. Sometimes you're the only one paying attention when everyone else is looking away. And sometimes being just a number processor is exactly what the world needs. Because numbers don't lie. And liars hate people who understand numbers. That's my story. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where you completely turned the tables on someone who underestimated you? I'd love to hear your stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're never nothing. Never.